Inside with intelligence, depth, whimsy. Morning edition from National Public Radio. News as it's meant to be brewed.
This is WRLK-TV, Channel 35, Columbia, South Carolina.
A production of South Carolina ETV.
Just a few hours after it began, it was all over. The rain, the wind, the anticipation of where it would land, and the fear of what it might do. Slightly after midnight on Friday morning, Hurricane Hugo viciously attacked South Carolina, with a vengeance never seen before in this state, leaving behind miles and miles of devastation. It is like a war zone here, a battle that nobody won. On the morning after, ironically, the sun came out. The blue sky and brightness somehow didn't seem quite right. By then, the water was calm at Charleston's battery. A few boats were coming back in, and we found one fisherman. No, two. The gazebo in the park was still there, and an old steamer trunk, and an abandoned car. It looked like most of the historic homes along the waterfront stood the test of time once again, as well as Hugo's fury. Most of the people left. However, Paul stayed the night.
What we didn't anticipate was the wind, and the wind was the carriage house behind this house. Apparently, we didn't know it at the time, but when we saw the evidence this morning, slates started coming off and coming through the windows, and so there was this shriek. I can't call it anything else, of the wind coming through the house, and it would build up to just like this, and then every once in a while it punctuated with breaking glass, and you just knew. And so when it shifted after the eye, it actually built to a crescendo before coming from the north. But when the eye went over, we said, okay, well, we know it's coming back. So we prepared ourselves for, a half hour of really hard wind and then something diminishing. And it didn't. It just blew like hell for 2 hours.
It was the wind, not the rain, that caused most of the damage. Trees were literally lifted from deep within the ground, cars crushed, and walls blown away. The bridge to Sullivan's Island and the Isle of Palms was torn and twisted, and the residents who evacuated were left stranded on the other side. David, with his family, was still waiting. You have little children?
I do, and we're worried about school. My little girl goes to school out here, and so we don't know what will happen with that. We don't know where to put our family, especially without electricity. But, we all, Charleston, people have good friends here, and everybody's with other family members or friends who are taking care of us.
So you're going to be optimistic?
Oh, yes, definitely. We'll be back here in the next couple of weeks.
We left yesterday, and we went really across the street here over to the Brook Green Motel, and left our room during the eye of the hurricane because the roof was coming off. And
You're laughing.
Yeah, well, you can laugh now. It wasn't much fun at the time. It was sort of weird, really. I mean...
Most people seem to be quite optimistic, though, in the midst of this disaster.
Well, there's not much else one can do.
In Mount Pleasant, the destruction was as far as the eye could see. A massive truck flipped on its side, and a local donut shop with no windows. One of the most dramatic sights was this sailboat tossed into the middle of the road near Charleston Marina. At Folly Beach, the Holiday Inn was still standing, barely. Most cottages and homes were blown apart.
Ours is the house with the red wall. The house on either side went down. I guess this house is built old and well, better than we thought it was. We used to have front porches on the front, and the walls to my apartment are out. So, but there's stuff to salvage.
There was a road right here?
Yeah.
It's gone.
Yep. Not too surprising.
Stuff out here in front that's Yours?
Yeah, this was my daughter's. I don't know how it got out here, but that wicker, that was a wicker elephant. That was in my living room, so, you know, stuff was moving all over.
What are you going to do now, do you think?
I don't know. It's, you know, we had a lot of time to think about it. It's not too big a surprise that we lost what we lost, and it's just stuff anyway, so it's not a big deal.
Craig had just returned from Somerville to find the damage to his home an incredible horror. Soggy pieces of furniture slammed into the kitchen and torn mattresses stacked into a wet heap.
It's a mess, isn't it?
Is that bedroom? Is that a closet?
Yeah. Oh, good. There's some stuff in there. Oh, look. Oh, look. That thing made it. All right. I hope it made it.
What is it?
It's a print of the one of the rooms in the Omni downtown. Looks like it suffered some water damage in there.
The power of water and wind that can leave a trail of destruction that is almost incomprehensible. Never before has a storm caused such havoc on our state as this one. There was David back in 1979. That was a minimal hurricane. And then Diana in 84 simply skirted the coastline. Many folks can remember Gracie back in 1959 that caused destruction from Beaufort to Charleston. But not even Hazel in 54, which practically demolished Myrtle Beach, had the punch that Hugo had. Hugo began its reign of terror a week earlier. On Monday, it crashed into Puerto Rico, leaving 25 people dead and thousands homeless. It skirted by the Bahamas, then headed northwest, straight for South Carolina. With winds in excess of 135 miles per hour, just after midnight on Friday, it slammed into Charleston, then plowed through the Midlands and exited the state into Charlotte, all in under 4 hours. A storm of this magnitude, traveling 20 miles per hour, with winds at the innermost wall of the eye circulating at around 115 miles per hour, causes the velocity of the wind on the right side of the center to be the greatest. And that is where most of the damage occurred. The area surrounding McClellanville received the peak of the storm surge, a 100-mile-long wall of water that powerfully pushed through anything in its way. Because of high tide, the surge was between 11 and 15 feet along the coastline. For homes built closest to the shore, there was nowhere for the water to go. Ones higher up and further back fared much better. The storm surge for the last major hurricane of the century, Hazel, practically wiped out Garden City and caused heavy damage to Myrtle Beach. South Carolina has since developed plans to respond to such disasters. More on this from Tom Fowler.
In planning and the aftermath, although many agencies and officials play key roles, responsibility rests heaviest on the chief executive, the governor. The morning after Hugo, traveling in a Black Hawk helicopter of the South Carolina National Guard, the governor and other key officials swooped low over hard-hit areas such as Sullivan's Island, the Isle of Palms, and McClellanville. Spotting a school surrounded by water, the aircraft circled, then landed. The school was an evacuation center for residents of McClellanville. Although it was set back far from the water and farther still from the ocean, it was surrounded by rising water and hit hard with an 8-foot wave, according to those inside. Cars were shoved together, and the people were shaken. The governor gave assurances of state help, heard their worries and experiences of a dark night, and then moved on to the next stop in the long day. At the Georgetown airport, the governor met a federal disaster relief official, himself on site to review the damage. In the air again, the copter moved over hard-hit Garden City Beach and up the Strand, landing in North Myrtle Beach to meet 6th District Congressman Robin Talon and senior United States Senator Strom Thurmond. Heading back to Columbia, the governor ended one day to begin the next with on-site inspections of damage in the PD. The plans were long in the making for a storm all knew would eventually come. The last big storm, Hazel, is a memory to few, history to most. Hugo now is reality, with thanks to those who planned and followed through to save so many lives. Lives which in an earlier time would surely have been lost. In the weeks and months ahead, the brute loss of so much can be tempered by this fact. Nearly all remain to rebuild.
This used to be a road here at Folly Beach, and over there was the Atlantic House restaurant, which was a landmark for tourists, visitors, and the residents. About 80% of the homes along Folly Beach have been destroyed. The barrier island's definitely the hardest hit, and inland destruction as well. We have a series of reports for you now, the first from Myrtle Beach.
This is Mark Schaefer reporting. For Myrtle Beach residents, it was a simple case of believe it or not, as parts of the popular resort looked more like East Beirut rather than the sun-fun city. Saturday morning, armed National Guardsmen patrolled streets and beaches, discouraging sightseers and potential looters. Although according to Staff Sergeant John Marshall, few problems had been reported.
Not so far. Most of the people have been very cooperative.
While Myrtle Beach braced for the full intensity of Hugo's force, most of the damage was superficial, with exceptions like the downtown pier, most of which is floating in the Atlantic. Portions of the city escaped virtually untouched by the storm. Others were less fortunate. On the south end near Springmaid Beach, a mobile home blocked traffic on Ocean Boulevard. Across the street, Tom Russo with the Myrtle Beach Chamber of Commerce surveyed the damage with optimism.
Well, we need to let people know throughout the area that, in probably days and weeks, that different properties will be able to receive visitors, ready for visitors to come in. So I think that'll be our job, is to let them know that Myrtle Beach still exists and we're here.
Most Grand Strand residents moved inland following Governor Carroll Campbell's evacuation order, but a few, like Myrtle Beach resident Craig Thompson, elected to ride out the storm.
The sound of the thing could be heard long before it really started to build the wind, you could hear it coming. The trees cracking and the things falling down and around us. It was just time to shake everybody's hand, give the last kisses, and we tried to laugh it on through, we were joking and singing, but it went on and on and on, and finally it wasn't funny anymore.
A few miles south in Surfside Beach, it gets less amusing. Here, the evidence of Hugo's destructive capability becomes graphically real as dunes were gobbled up and hotel pools fell into the sea.
Surfside's a lot worse than people thought.
The property owners have no insurance here?
Mm-mm.
Like many, Ann Ingalls returned to a shattered home.
I was starting my own business, window tinting, but I don't even know if the building in Garden City is still there, so we're going to have to wait. They said the government was going to help for people that's homeless, so if they'll help us out, we're going to be back down here and start over.
You sound pretty optimistic.
Got to. I've got a 14-year-old I got to keep going. She's really hit hard with this. So, yeah, we just won't live on the ocean.
Donald Byrd was luckier.
We survived without a scratch, not even a broken window.
But for most along the ocean front, Hugo means major losses. Those homes still standing suffered major structural damage, while others simply moved inland. Dr. Paul Gaze directs the Center for Marine and Wetland Studies at USC's Coastal Carolina campus.
Well, they're in obviously a very difficult time. Materials and structures, many of these structures may no longer be inhabitable, even if they're still standing. What the situation will be with the new legislation and Beachfront Management Act, it's going to get tested now. We'll see what happens. It's going to be uncertain.
And just when it couldn't possibly get any worse, it does. Here in Garden City, authorities estimate nearly 95% of the homes are total losses. If Myrtle Beach resembles Beirut's, Garden City looks more like Normandy Beach. Here, the storm created a terrifying chain reaction, as front row houses were ripped from their foundations and literally turned into missiles, some cutting a swath through the next 3 rows of homes. Yet in the midst of this devastation, there are those veterans of Hazel, like Jack Cockfield, who look ahead with optimism.
Oh, with time, it'll come back just like it did before. It just takes time.
So people just will build here no matter what?
They'll build on this beach regardless of what happens.
And those like Mrs. William Squires, who are less optimistic.
Think this will ever look the same?
Well, someday I might not live to see it.
It will take years for Grand Strand residents to dig out and rebuild after Hugo's visit. And with new beachfront management legislation, those years are apt to be fraught with litigation and controversy. Reporting from the Grand Strand, I'm Mark Schaefer.
The devastation that began on the coast extended well into the Midlands. Near Shaw Air Force Base, a daycare center, a place of carefree children playing just a few hours earlier, was laid bare to the elements. Jerry Hardy owns the building. He was videotaping the remnants of his property.
It's probably got $400,000 worth of damage to it, probably. It's devastating. All these people's out of work, going to be out of business. I think there's about 6 of them out of business now. It's something else. Something else.
As we proceeded down the coast Friday afternoon, the full effects of the catastrophe began to sink in. Virtually every building, every home, store, barn, everything had sustained damage. Most of the damage came from the vast number of trees that lay toppled, torn up by the roots or snapped in half. At times, the roads were impassable, forcing us to travel on nothing more than cow paths to continue. As we got to Georgetown itself, the presence of the National Guard was far more pervasive.
How many people do you have with you?
I have 90.
As we cruised through the streets of old Georgetown, it appeared remarkably unaffected by the storm. Along Front Street in downtown Georgetown, this washed-up boat was one of the few dramatic evidences of the storm. Even so, police had the area cordoned off against looters. When we arrived, business owners like Joey Rabin of the Kudzu Bakery were already beginning the task of cleaning up.
36 inches of water that rose from the Sandpit River and came forward through the back. And now it's just a matter of cleaning up, getting the sand and mud out of the building, getting the tape, cleaning it back up, and getting the power, and we'll be back in business.
Rabin said he would try to give his perishable food to a shelter, since it was needed, and without power, there was simply no way for him to keep it. We then left Georgetown to try to get to Pawleys Island. However, slow travel and a 6:30 p.m. curfew kept us off the island itself. National Guard troopers Boyd on the left and Hawkins on the right were guarding the island with orders to stop anyone from proceeding to the island, including homeowners.
Not allowing anybody other than law enforcement, utility personnel, that type of person in there.
What happens if someone tries to get over there?
We stop them. About as simple as that.
Whatever it takes?
Yeah, whatever it takes. Whatever force necessary.
The presence of police and National Guard throughout the Grand Strand was evident. Troopers were running up and down the roads. However, the guardsmen we talked to on that one entrance to Pawleys Island had not been able to get in touch with their own families in Florence, South Carolina. We promised we'd try to do our best. From Georgetown, I'm Tim Carrier for the South Carolina Educational Television Network.
This is Jim Welch reporting for ETV Network affiliate WRJA-TV in Sumter. Reporter Patty Just and producer-director Ed Sexauer and videographer London Davis taped damages in the cities and surrounding areas. Sumter officials said the city had prepared for Hurricane Hugo, but had not expected to be in the direct path of the storm, with winds clocked at 109 miles per hour. Early estimates project as much as $47 million damaged, not counting agriculture and crop losses, removal of debris, while some officials report the totals could be closer to $95 million.
From everything I've seen, the community in one word has really just been devastated. It's a lot of tree damage, a lot of damage to our commercial areas and several areas of our community that some of our commercial strips are just rubble. A lot of glass and windows and things. The roofs have been torn off of buildings. Severe damage in a good portion of our community. A lot of the power lines, water services, other things are totally interrupted and may not be on for as much as at least till Monday for the water. We understand as late as Friday for the power, so it could be another week before we get power here. So it's been a devastating effect here in Sumter. I was at my home, which is on the western part of the community, and basically in the hallway praying for sunshine, praying for something the next day that we would get through the night. It was pretty devastating. At my home, we've got 11 trees down and 4 of them across the back of our house. It's complete rubble in our neighborhood. All the power lines are down, and we were all just out hugging and glad to see each other alive yesterday morning at dawn. So it's amazing that we made it through this type of Holocaust that we did.
Sumter County Sheriff Tommy Mims is enforcing a dusk to dawn curfew with a limited number of arrests being made for looting. Some units of the South Carolina National Guard are on hand to help with the enforcement.
I can't stress it strong enough for people that don't have a reason to be out to stay in. And we're asking for the cooperation, asking for people's patience, asking them to be calm. We're experiencing a terrible disaster right now. And a lot of things that we're accustomed to, our water, our power, we just don't have it. And until that's restored, we're asking people to work with us, and so far they have been in the biggest part. To stay home is the main thing, unless you absolutely have to get out.
Vic Jones is the Sumter County Director of Public Safety.
Even during the storm, we were talking to people that were hysterical. But you could not respond because the wind was so strong. The only thing we could respond with was a fire engine loaded with water. And so we depended on those folks for the response to try and help people that needed help. And even that, when the hurricane was the strongest, the winds, you're limited in anything that you could do because you really couldn't, the folks couldn't stand up or do those kind of things. We have not had as many people look for water yet as they have for food yet as they have for water. And we are now, you can see behind us, we are providing water. And it's taken time, and I know people have gotten frustrated with us and would like to have seen it quicker, and we would like to have seen it quicker too, but it just takes time to get these things and get them in motion.
Everywhere there are human stories of folks who lost all their belongings, as in the case of the Edwin Brown family.
Well, when the storm hit, my wife went over to her brother's house, and we come back the next day to check out, see how everything was doing. Neighbors told us that a tornado or wind had turned our trailer over. It's come up right behind our trailer and turned it over and destroyed everything.
Much of Sumter will be rebuilt. Homes will be repaired. Businesses reestablished. But the echoing refrain from city residents is that the Gamecock City will never be the same. This is Jim Welch reporting.
News of Hurricane Hugo's destruction of South Carolina's coastline left little to the imagination as to what lay in store for the upstate. When the storm reached the city of Rock Hill, it still had more than enough strength to make its mark on the landscape. Huge trees were uprooted like weeds. Utility poles were snapped in pieces along roads and highways, leaving dangerous high-voltage wires lying on the ground. Most residents of York County found themselves without electricity, and initial estimates are that it will take at least 1 week to restore service back to normal. In the meantime, people are trying to get by as best they can.
So all we were looking for was somebody that heats by gas so we could have coffee.
All of Rock Hill was affected by Hugo's fury. Many of the area's prominent landscapes were left in a state of devastation. Winthrop College, which is located in the heart of Rock Hill, didn't escape the devastation, as many of the campus's beautiful oak trees were destroyed by the high winds. However, it could have been much worse, as the campus main buildings received only minor damage. But some of Rock Hill's neighborhoods weren't so lucky. Many homes were damaged by falling trees when the deadly winds reached the city in the early hours of Friday morning. At the City Hall, the Communication Center for the Emergency Preparedness Agency was teeming with activity. Here, volunteers and city officials manned telephones to help coordinate disaster response efforts among the various emergency services. According to a spokesman, there was only one confirmed fatality caused by Hugo. A 6-month-old girl was killed near the town of York when a tree fell on the mobile home she was in. Now that the storm has passed, Rock Hill and much of York County is busy picking up the pieces. City police, along with the Army National Guard, will be protecting damaged stores and other commercial businesses from the potential of looting. With electricity out in most of the city, those few gas stations which did have power to pump gas were swamped with vehicles low on fuel. Utility crews were busy working to restore power, or without electricity, the city could easily run out of drinkable water.
Their priority right now is they're fixing to run out of water. They're fixing to lose the whole Rock Hill water system. With a little bit of water that's in the water tanks, we could be totally out of water by 3 o'clock in the morning.
This storm has been described by some as the worst ever to occur in the upstate. And because of the hardship it imposed on the citizens of York County, There's little doubt that Hurricane Hugo will never be forgotten. This is Chuck Smith reporting from WNSC-ETV in Rock Hill.
There is no question about will there be a storm. There will be a storm. The question is, when will there be a storm? That's what we can't handle.
I'm Charlotte Satilli. The voice you just heard is that of Dr. John Dean, a biologist interviewed for the ETV documentary, Who Owns the Beach? But few dreamed the storm to come would pack the force of Hurricane Hugo. Folly Beach, August 1988. Customers of the Atlantic House restaurant remember the water lapping under the building at high tide. A pile of rubble with the recognizable red roof is all that remains. Moving northward, many residents and tourists can identify the Sullivan's Island Lighthouse. The one-story brick building housing Sullivan's Island Elementary School students and the nearby houses. The lighthouse still stands. Sullivan's Island Elementary School now has a pool of water in the playground. The houses northward are severely damaged, destroyed, and in some cases, missing. The Isle of Palms Front Beach Business District held many memories for island residents and visitors. The Windjammer at 10th and Ocean, small businesses, condominiums, the fishing pier, the beachside development. Here's that same area today. Even the oceanfront houses, which were set far back from the ocean, were not spared. Pawleys Island, a haven for many, seen from a 1988 aerial view. The same area now has been divided by nature, with a new canal cut through, wide enough to fit what is left of this house. Last summer, Litchfield looked like this, moving northward towards the Litchfield Inn. The disaster of 1989 left that same area with this appearance. A recognizable landmark in Garden City is the Kingfisher Inn, with the huge fishing pier in front of it. Now it's difficult to recognize. The fishing pier no longer stands.
We can remain thankful people, caring people, humble people. We remain a community that remembers. Remember last Thursday night and Friday morning as long as you live. Remember the relief and gratitude you felt. Shall tribulation or distress separate us from the love of God? No. We are more than conquerors. Remember your neighbor's help and the compassion that you felt toward him. People matter more than property. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions.
Counting love's